In a dark corner of an industrial estate in West London, a 24/7 operation is gradually turning the last 50 years' worth of BBC videotape into zeros and ones. It's a mammoth task, and the story behind it goes back to a chance visit in 1998 by the then Director General.
John Burt was wandering around the basement of Henrywood House where the Radio 1 collection of tapes was being stored, Peel sessions and things like this. And he asked what would happen if there was a fire here, and he was told all of this material would go up in smoke and you wouldn't have it anymore. At which point he said we can't possibly have this, and the whole process started.
It was a process of digitising decades of popular culture and history, and it was always going to bring with it some challenges, not least of which is the sheer scale of the task.
We have a range of vaults here at Perivale. They all hold different media. Each vault's temperature controlled and has the right environment for the format that it holds. Altogether there's about 60 miles of shelving and about 4.5 million items within this building. And that's increasing, that's growing all the time.
Right, 373.
Some of the assets are over 100 years old, with wax cylinder recordings from as far back as the late 1800s. But it's not the oldest materials that require the most urgent attention. It's a recent generation of digital videotape that has proved to be the most vulnerable.
This videotape format D3, this is effectively considered obsolescent now. We've got several machines. A few other production houses have machines that can play this tape, but most people wouldn't know what to do with it if they received it. We have 340,000 of these tapes.
Now D3 as a format, the tape is very thin, there's a lot of heat generated in there, and through its age and through the environment it was kept in, it displayed signs of hydrolysis, which is where tape soaks up water like a sponge. And tapes used to stick, oxide used to shed, and heads used to get damaged.
It was clear that the D3 tape archive, stored in the depths of Television Centre, needed to be digitally preserved. And time was running out.
A project manager from BBC Technology at the time went out and bought every single spare there was in the world for D3. Even then we found that we would probably only get through at most 130,000 tapes. So we did have quite a tall order.
That meant the team would probably only have enough hardware to preserve around 1/3 of the D3 tapes, so they would have to be very selective. Added to this, the master collection contained the last remaining copies of programmes going back over 50 years.
Some of the D3 tapes from that period were from 2-inch and 1-inch video reels that were migrated onto D3. So now we're ingesting tapes that actually originated from a 2-inch video reel back in the 1960s.
The workflow for this huge project has been carefully thought through. The D3 tapes are scanned for metadata, loaded into a deck, and copied or ingested into a digital file. If the VTR detects any tape faults, it automatically logs them on a timeline to be assessed later on. During this process, the material is also duplicated onto a digibeta tape as a safety backup and for productions that may need the material right now. It's a people-intensive process, and it takes specially trained eyes to ensure faults aren't being introduced during ingest and baked in to the digital file as a consequence.
The main thing that everybody says is that it's kind of a black art. You have one tape that goes in one machine and maybe it will play fine in that machine, but if you had tried it in another one, it would have clogged or had dropouts. And really, sometimes there's almost no rhyme or reason to it except to keep on trying it in different ways. But then we're restricted also by the head life. So the whole time that you're ingesting things, you're really aware that this might be their last chance.
Once the ingest operator is satisfied they've achieved the best possible digitisation, the file has another stage of quality control, or QC, to get through before it's judged to be fit for the archive.
Our QC is divided into two categories. We'll have technical operators will first perform a primary check. Now, the first thing they'll do is look at the area where the VTR said there might be errors. If they find faults, they'll log what kind of faults they are. Was it audio or video? And was it historic? Or is it a new transfer fault?
Flippin' heck, Tucker! Flippin' heck!
Every day is another step into the press button age.
Historic faults could include things like where you have a film insert and the film's all speckly and grainy. You'll see things like splices going through. These were all acceptable and broadcast on television like that. 2-inch dropouts, 1-inch dropouts, little lines appearing, breaking up the picture. Lots of audio dropouts, which sounds like a small glitch or a small pop sometimes on the audio channel. We then have a second category of QC, which we call secondary checking, and that's more of a subjective review. A smaller team of people will review all the files that have faults found in them, and then they'll make a decision on whether we should re-ingest it or whether it's suitable for archival purposes.
You let them meet out of spite because...
So, for example, a small audio dropout and a quiet scene on a drama could be quite important.
Game to Connor.
However, a small audio dropout on a crowd scene at a tennis game, we might let that be passed because we can gain the audio back or similar audio to edit over that later on.
Game to draw.
With a tape collection the size of ours and the age of ours, you do have dirt and scratches and blemishes on tapes. But sometimes you will find that it is the only tape available, it has a deep scratch in it, and you cannot do anything with it, and that's as good as it gets. And that goes into the archive because that's a representation, that's what we have to do.
With the contents of up to 8 D3 tapes now reduced in footprint to a small LTO data cassette, they're then stored deep in the Perivale vaults.
Once the LTO's achieved a pass status, we'll store it in this vault here. We'll also make another copy of the LTO to reduce the risk, and we'll store it in a separate building at a different site. The reason we chose LTO was because we needed a storage format that was robust enough to take files and that would last a certain period of time. You know, the project was envisaged to take 5 to 6 years. So we looked around and we discovered that stock exchanges around the world, medical pharmaceutical companies, were all using LTO to back up large amounts of data.
As the D3 project comes to an end, the team at Perivale have stepped up production to ingest 140,000 of the next generation of Digibeta masters, bringing the entire BBC closer to a tapeless workflow from filming through to transmission. For the archive, delivering these gems from decades past means a constant juggling act between managing the storage of physical items and delivering digital files to meet the audience's increasing on-demand expectations.
Digitising the archive at the moment is very important for us. We're trying to do it as part of our preservation strategy, but the ultimate strategic aim is to be able to make more of our content available to our audiences through, for example, the iPlayer. At the moment you can download what was on last night to your PC. What we hope to do eventually is to make more of the back archive available through the iPlayer so that the audiences can really interact with our archive.